For 3 years, I was invisible. I cooked their meals, cleaned their messes, and raised their children while they sat around and judged me. My husband's family treated me like a servant, a maid they didn't have to pay. They'd hand me their dirty plates without a word. They'd criticize my cooking, my cleaning, my parenting. They'd make snide comments about my clothes, my job, my background. And I took it. I took it all because I loved my husband. Because I believed that family was worth fighting for. Because I thought if I just tried hard enough, they'd eventually accept me. Until my grandmother passed away. Until the letter came. Until the inheritance cleared. $32 million. And suddenly, they wanted to be my best friend. But I had a plan. A plan that would show them exactly what they'd thrown away. By the time I was done, they'd be the ones begging for forgiveness. And I'd be the one walking away with my head held high and a secret they would never see coming. My name is Clara, and I'm 30 years old. I'm a graphic designer, a woman who's spent her life creating beauty while being treated like she was invisible. I married Daniel 6 years ago, and from the moment I walked into his family's home, I was treated like a servant. His mother, Margaret, was the queen of the household. She ruled with an iron fist and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. His sister, Victoria, was the princess, spoiled, entitled, and always looking for someone to look down on. And his father, Harold, was the silent king, who never said a word but made his disapproval known through his silence. They all made it clear that I wasn't good enough for their family. I came from a working-class background. My parents were factory workers. I'd paid my own way through college. I worked with my hands, creating art for a living. To them, I was a phase, a mistake Daniel would eventually outgrow. They never said it directly, of course. They were too passive-aggressive for that. They'd make small comments, subtle digs, always delivered with a smile. Oh, Clara, what a unique career choice. Daniel always did have expensive taste. I'm sure your clients are very grateful. I swallowed it all. I smiled. I nodded. I pretended I didn't hear what they really meant. But I heard. And I remembered. The marriage was the beginning of the nightmare. Margaret insisted on being involved in every detail of our lives. She wanted to choose where we lived, what car we drove, how we raised our children. She wanted to control everything. Daniel, caught between his mother and his wife, tried to keep the peace. She's just trying to help, he'd say. Let her have this. It'll make her happy. But nothing made Margaret happy. She wanted me gone. She'd made that clear. She'd even told Daniel, in a voice she thought I couldn't hear, "You're making a mistake. She's not right for you." Daniel told me about it later, his face red with embarrassment. I told him it was fine. I told him I understood. But I didn't. I couldn't understand why a mother would be so cruel. Why she'd want to sabotage her own son's happiness. I didn't know it yet, but I was about to find out. Margaret had a plan. And it was far more elaborate than I'd ever imagined. Margaret started by undermining me in small ways. She'd forget to invite my family to important events. She'd accidentally break things I loved. She'd misplace my important documents and then offer to help me find them. It was death by 1,000 cuts, each one delivered with a smile. I was exhausted, stressed, and starting to doubt myself. Maybe she was right. Maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe I didn't deserve Daniel. But then I'd look at him, at the way he looked at me, and I'd remember why I was doing this. I loved him. And I wasn't going to let his mother ruin that. The worst part was how they treated me in public. They'd introduce me as Daniel's wife without mentioning my name. They'd talk about me as if I wasn't there. They'd make jokes at my expense and laugh when I didn't laugh along. It was humiliating. But I endured it because I loved Daniel. I thought love could conquer anything. I was wrong. The family gatherings were the worst. Every Sunday, we'd gather at Margaret's house for dinner. And every Sunday, I'd be expected to cook, clean, and serve everyone. They'd sit at the table, laughing and talking, while I ran back and forth from the kitchen. They never offered to help. They never said thank you. They just expected it. And I let them. I let them because I wanted to be part of the family. I let them because I thought if I just worked hard enough, they'd eventually accept me. I was so naive. I remember one Sunday, I'd spent hours preparing a meal. I'd made everything from scratch, using my grandmother's recipes. The table was set beautifully. The food was perfect. And when I finally sat down to eat, Margaret looked at my plate and said, "Oh, Clara, you don't need to eat with us. You can eat in the kitchen." I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked at Daniel, hoping he'd defend me. But he just looked down at his plate, silent. I got up, took my plate, and walked into the kitchen. And I ate alone while they laughed and talked. That was the moment I realized I was invisible. That was the moment I realized I was a servant, not a family member. And that was the moment I started to plan my escape. The only person in Daniel's family who ever treated me kindly was his grandmother, Evelyn. She was old, frail, and living in a nursing home. She'd always been warm to me, always asked about my life, my dreams. She'd tell me stories about her own struggles, about how she'd been treated as an outsider when she first married into the family. She understood me in a way no one else did. When I visited her, I felt seen. I felt valued. And I knew she felt the same way about me. Evelyn passed away in the spring. I was devastated. She'd been the only ally I had in that family. She'd been the only one who saw me as a person. I went to her funeral, dressed in black, my heart heavy. Margaret and Victoria barely acknowledged me. They acted like I wasn't even there. But I didn't care. I was there to say goodbye to Evelyn. I was there to honor her memory. After the funeral, the family gathered at Margaret's house for the reading of the will. I wasn't expecting anything. I knew I wasn't a blood relative. I knew I wasn't part of the family. But when the lawyer read Evelyn's last wishes, my heart nearly stopped. She'd left me something. Something that would change everything. $32 million. And a letter. A letter that would reveal the truth about my grandmother's past. The lawyer handed me the letter with trembling hands. I opened it, my heart pounding. It was written in Evelyn's shaky handwriting, her words jumping off the page. "My dearest Clara, you were the only one who ever saw me. The only one who ever listened. I know they've treated you horribly. I've seen it, and I've been ashamed. But I never had the courage to stop them. I'm sorry for that. I'm leaving you everything. The house, the money, the heirlooms. You deserve it. You've earned it. Use it to build the life you deserve. And don't let them bully you anymore. You're stronger than you think. Love, Evelyn." I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Evelyn had seen me. She'd understood. And she'd left me the one thing that would free me from this family. I looked up, and I saw the faces of Daniel's family. They were pale, shocked, and furious. They couldn't believe that Evelyn had left everything to me. "This is a mistake," Margaret hissed. She wasn't in her right mind. She was confused. "She wasn't confused," I said. She knew exactly what she was doing. The room fell silent. I felt a strange sense of power. For the first time, I had the upper hand. Margaret tried to contest the will. She hired lawyers, dragged us through court. But Evelyn had been smart. She'd made the will airtight. There was no way to challenge it. The money was mine. I'd never have to work again. I'd never have to rely on anyone. I'd never have to be treated like a servant again. I sat at my kitchen table that night, staring at the letter. Evelyn had left me $32 million. It was more money than I'd ever dreamed of. I could buy a house. I could travel the world. I could start my own business. I could do anything I wanted. I thought about Daniel's family, about how they'd treated me all these years. They'd made me feel worthless, invisible. They'd used me, belittled me, and never once shown me kindness. And now, they'd have to face the consequences of their actions. The money was mine. And I was going to use it to show them exactly what they'd thrown away. I was going to make them regret every single moment of cruelty. I was going to make them pay. But I knew I couldn't do it alone. I needed a plan. A careful, calculated plan that would expose their cruelty and leave them with nothing. I started making a list of everything they'd done to me. The insults, the slights, the humiliations. I wrote it all down, every single detail. And then I started planning my revenge. I knew I couldn't confront them directly. That would only give them time to twist the narrative. I needed to be strategic. I needed to wait for the right moment. I started by calling my lawyer, a sharp woman named Rachel who'd handled my grandmother's estate. I told her the whole story. She listened carefully, then said, "Clara, this is a powerful position you're in. But you need to be careful. Money changes people. And your husband's family is already desperate." I asked her what I should do. "Don't tell anyone about the money yet," she said. "Let them think you're still the same person. Wait until they show their true colors. Then, when they least expect it, you reveal the truth." I nodded, understanding. I was going to play the long game. I decided to keep the money a secret. I didn't tell Daniel. I didn't tell anyone. I wanted to see how they'd treat me if they thought nothing had changed. I wanted to see if they'd ever show me kindness. I went back to my life, cooking, cleaning, serving. I acted like nothing had happened. And I waited. It didn't take long for them to show their true colors. A few weeks after the reading of the will, Margaret called me and asked me to come over. She said she needed help with a party. I knew it was a trap. She was trying to keep me in my place. But I went anyway. I wanted to see what she'd do. When I arrived, she handed me a list of tasks. She wanted me to cook, clean, and serve the guests. She wanted me to be invisible. I smiled and said, "Of course, Margaret. Whatever you need." I spent the whole evening serving her guests, while she sat and laughed with her friends. And I bided my time. The next few months were the hardest. I continued to play the role of the dutiful servant. I cooked, cleaned, and served. I smiled and pretended everything was fine. I kept my head down and my mouth shut. But inside, I was seething. Every insult, every slight, every moment of cruelty was fuel for my fire. I started documenting everything. I kept a journal, recording every instance of their abuse. I took pictures, saved text messages, and made copies of emails. I was building a case against them. I wanted to be prepared when the moment finally came to expose them. I also started researching ways to protect my inheritance. I wanted to make sure they couldn't touch it. I met with a financial advisor and set up a trust. I made sure the money was safe and secure. I was ready to strike. I also started to see Daniel differently. He'd been complicit in his family's abuse. He'd watched them humiliate me and never said a word. He'd let them treat me like a servant. And now, I realized, he was just as guilty as they were. I loved him, but I knew I couldn't stay with him. Not after everything that had happened. Not after he'd failed to protect me. The money was my ticket out. It was my chance to start over. I was going to leave them all behind and build a new life, a life where I was respected and valued. I was going to be free. I started to plan my exit strategy. I looked at apartments, researched schools for my son, and consulted with a divorce attorney. I was ready to leave, but I needed to be smart about it. I needed to wait for the right moment. I received an invitation to a family dinner at Margaret's house. It was supposed to be a celebration of Daniel's promotion. I knew it was going to be a trap. I knew they'd try to humiliate me. But I went anyway. I was ready. I'd been waiting for this moment for months. Agar apn bi kabi jishi ace rishtadar ka samna kia hi jo samni kuch or peeth piche kuch or ho. To ubi channel ko subscribe carrion or muyi comments main betayan. Hyunk jo agli cheese hon wali ti, asan sabki hosh yura dai. I walked into the house, my heart pounding. The family was all there, sitting at the table. They looked at me with contempt. I took my seat, and they began to talk about me as if I wasn't there. They made jokes about my clothes, my job, my background. They laughed at me. And I sat there, silent, waiting for the right moment. Margaret stood up and made a toast. She talked about how proud she was of Daniel, how he'd overcome so much. She talked about how he'd finally found a suitable wife. The room erupted into laughter. I felt the tears welling up in my eyes, but I didn't cry. I took a deep breath and stood up. I have an announcement, I said. The room fell silent. I'm leaving Daniel. I'm leaving this family. And I'm taking everything that was ever promised to me. Margaret scoffed. What could you possibly have, she asked. I have something you'll never have, I said. I have dignity. I reached into my purse and pulled out a letter. This is from Evelyn. She left me everything. The house, the money, the heirlooms. $32 million. The room was dead silent. I watched the blood drain from their faces. They were all in shock. I'm done being your servant, I said. I'm done being invisible. I'm done being treated like I'm worthless. I turned and walked out of the room. They called after me, begging me to come back. But I didn't look back. I was free. I filed for divorce the next day. Daniel tried to fight it, but he had no case. I had all the evidence I needed to prove that he'd been complicit in his family's abuse. The judge granted me a generous settlement. I kept the house and the money. Daniel was left with nothing. Margaret was devastated. She'd lost her son, her family, and her fortune. She called me, begging me to forgive her. She said she'd made a mistake, that she'd been wrong. But I didn't care. I'd moved on. I'd built a new life, a life where I was respected and valued. I started my own business. I bought a beautiful house. I traveled the world. I was happy. The experience changed me. I became stronger, more confident. I learned to stand up for myself. I learned that I was worthy of love and respect. I also learned that money can't buy happiness. But it can buy freedom. And freedom was the greatest gift of all. I started a foundation to help other women who'd been through similar experiences. I wanted to give them the tools they needed to escape abusive relationships. I wanted to help them find their voice. It was the most fulfilling work I'd ever done. I was making a real difference in the world. I was proud of who I'd become. I was proud of what I'd accomplished. And I was grateful for every single moment. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. I was officially free. I changed my name back to my maiden name, Clara Evans. I wanted to start fresh. I wanted to leave behind every trace of my old life. I sold the house and moved to a new city. I bought a beautiful apartment with a view of the city skyline. I decorated it the way I wanted, filled it with colors and textures that made me happy. I was finally living my life on my own terms. And it felt amazing. Healing was a slow, gentle process. It didn't happen overnight. It took time, patience, and a lot of love. I started going to therapy to deal with the trauma of the past few years. I needed to process everything, to let go of the anger and resentment. My therapist helped me understand that I wasn't to blame. I'd been a victim of emotional abuse, and I'd done nothing wrong. I learned to forgive myself. I learned to move on. I also started to rebuild my relationships. I reconnected with old friends, the ones I'd lost touch with during my marriage. I made new friends, people who valued me for who I was. I started dating again, slowly, carefully. I wasn't ready for a serious relationship, but it was nice to feel wanted again. I also started to think about my grandmother. She'd been my only ally, my only source of strength. She'd seen me, understood me, and loved me unconditionally. I owed her everything. I decided to honor her memory by living my best life. I started a scholarship fund in her name, helping young women pursue their dreams. It was the least I could do. The years passed, and I continued to grow. I became a successful businesswoman, a philanthropist, and a mentor. I was happy. I'd finally found my place in the world. I'd finally found my voice. And I was grateful for every single moment. I also wrote a book about my experience, sharing my story with the world. I hoped it would help other women in similar situations. The book was a bestseller, and I was invited to speak at conferences and events. It was surreal, seeing my face on a screen, knowing that my story had touched so many lives. I started a support group for women who'd been through similar experiences. We met once a week, sharing our stories and offering support and encouragement. It was amazing to see the strength in those women. They'd been through so much, but they were still standing. They were still fighting. I was honored to be part of their journey. I also started a YouTube channel, sharing tips and advice for women in abusive relationships. I wanted to reach as many people as possible. I wanted to let them know that they weren't alone. There was a way out. There was hope. The channel grew quickly, and I received thousands of messages from women all over the world. They shared their own stories of pain and triumph. It was humbling to see how much strength people had. It was inspiring. I knew I couldn't save everyone, but I could save some. And that was enough. I was making a real difference in the world. I was proud of what I'd accomplished. I was proud of the woman I'd become. I'd been through so much, but I'd come out the other side, stronger than ever. I was grateful for every single moment. I continued to speak at conferences, sharing my story and encouraging others to stand up for themselves. I wrote a second book, a collection of stories from women I'd met on my journey. It was a bestseller, and I was invited to speak on national television. It was surreal, seeing my face on a screen, knowing that my story had touched so many lives. I was making a real difference in the world. And that was the greatest gift of all. I sat on my porch one evening, watching the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful. I thought about everything I'd been through, everything I'd overcome. The abuse, the loneliness, the fear. It had all been so painful, so devastating. But it had also been a gift. It had forced me to become the woman I was meant to be. I'd learned to stand on my own 2 feet, to fight for what was right, to protect the people I loved. I'd learned that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. I thought about Daniel sometimes, about what could have been. I felt sorry for him, in a way. He'd been so blind, so weak. He'd let his mother control him, manipulate him, destroy him. He'd lost everything because he couldn't say no to her. But that was his journey, not mine. I'd done my part. I'd loved him, supported him, believed in him. And he'd thrown it all away. I had no regrets. I'd done the right thing. I'd protected myself. And that was all that mattered. I looked up at the stars, twinkling in the night sky. I felt a sense of peace, a sense of contentment. I'd built a beautiful life, a life filled with love and purpose. I'd found my voice, and I'd used it to help others. I'd become the woman I'd always wanted to be. And I knew that whatever happened next, I'd be okay. I'd always be okay. Because I was a survivor. And survivors never give up. I looked at my reflection in the window, and I saw a woman who had overcome so much. A woman who was strong, confident, and free. I was proud of who I'd become. And I knew that the future was bright. I was invited to speak at a women's conference about financial abuse and manipulation. It was a huge honor, a chance to make a real difference in people's lives. I prepared my testimony carefully, knowing that it could change lives. I told my story, from the abuse to the inheritance to the divorce. I spoke about the importance of trusting your instincts, the power of evidence, and the strength that comes from standing up for yourself. The room was silent as I spoke, the women listening intently. When I finished, there was a standing ovation. It was a moment I'd never forget. After the conference, I was approached by a young woman. She was crying, thanking me for my testimony. She told me she'd been through a similar situation, that my story had given her hope. She said she'd been planning to give up, to accept her fate. But hearing my story had inspired her to fight. She told me she was going to leave her abuser, to start a new life. I hugged her, tears streaming down my face. I'd made a difference. I'd saved a life. It was the most powerful moment of my life. That young woman went on to become a success story. She got a job, found a place to live, and started a new life. She even joined my support group, becoming a mentor to other women. It was a beautiful circle, a testament to the power of hope and resilience. I knew then that I'd made the right choice. I'd chosen to fight, to stand up for myself. And that choice had not only saved me, it had saved others. I was proud of what I'd accomplished, proud of the legacy I was building. I thought about the money again, the $32 million that had started it all. It was a reminder that sometimes, the things that seem the most precious are the ones that are the most hollow. And the things that seem the most worthless are the ones that hold the most value. The real treasure was the strength I'd found within myself. And that was something no one could ever take away from me. I look back now at everything that happened. The abuse, the inheritance, the divorce. It's all part of my story now. And I'm grateful for it. Because it made me who I am. It taught me about strength. It taught me about resilience. And it taught me that sometimes, the people who hurt us the most are the ones who need our forgiveness the most. I found my voice. I fought for my truth. And I refused to be broken. I've always believed that love is worth fighting for. But I also know that sometimes, love means walking away. It means setting boundaries. It means protecting yourself. I've learned to trust my instincts, to listen to my gut, and to never let anyone make me feel small again. I thought about Margaret sometimes, about the woman she could have been. I felt sorry for her. She'd been so consumed by her need for control that she'd pushed away the people who loved her. She'd missed out on so much. On her son's happiness. On her granddaughter's love. She'd died alone, bitter and angry. I'd made peace with her before she passed. I'd visited her in the hospital, a few weeks before she died. I'd forgiven her. Not for her. For me. I'd let go of the anger and the hurt. I'd moved on. And I'd built a life that was full of love and purpose. I started a foundation to help other women who'd been through similar experiences. I wanted to give them the tools they needed to escape abusive relationships. I wanted to help them find their voice. It was the most fulfilling work I'd ever done. I was making a real difference in the world. I look back now at everything that happened. The abuse, the inheritance, the divorce. It's all part of my story now. And I'm grateful for it. Because it made me who I am. It taught me about strength. It taught me about resilience. And it taught me that sometimes, the people who hurt us the most are the ones who need our forgiveness the most. I found my voice. I fought for my truth. And I refused to be broken. I've always believed that love is worth fighting for. But I also know that sometimes, love means walking away. It means setting boundaries. It means protecting yourself. I've learned to trust my instincts, to listen to my gut, and to never let anyone make me feel small again. I thought about Daniel sometimes, about the life we could have had. I felt sorry for him. He'd been so weak, so blind. He'd let his family control him, manipulate him, destroy him. He'd lost everything because he couldn't say no to them. But that was his journey, not mine. I'd done my part. I'd loved him, supported him, believed in him. And he'd thrown it all away. I had no regrets. I'd done the right thing. I'd protected myself. And that was all that mattered. I sat on my porch one evening, watching the sunset. I felt a sense of peace. I'd built a beautiful life. I was proud of who I'd become. And I knew that whatever happened next, I'd be okay. I started a new chapter in my life. I decided to mentor other women who'd been through similar experiences. I started a support group at the local community center. We'd meet every Thursday evening, sharing our stories and supporting each other. It was amazing to see the strength in those women. They'd been through so much, but they were still standing. They were still fighting. I was honored to be part of their journey. I also started writing a blog about my experience. I wanted to share my story with the world. I wanted to help people who were going through similar situations. I wanted to let them know that they weren't alone. I spent hours at my desk, pouring my heart out onto the page. It was therapeutic. It helped me process my emotions and make sense of everything that had happened. The blog became popular, and I was invited to speak at conferences and events. I was amazed by the response. People from all over the world reached out to me, sharing their own stories of betrayal and healing. I realized that I'd found my purpose. I was meant to help others. I was meant to be a voice for the voiceless. And I was grateful for that. I also started a financial literacy program for women who'd been victims of financial abuse. I wanted to teach them how to manage their money, how to protect themselves, how to build a secure future. I partnered with local banks and financial advisors to offer free workshops. We covered everything from budgeting to investing to understanding credit scores. It was incredibly rewarding to see these women gain confidence and take control of their financial lives. I also worked with a lawyer to create a legal guide for women who were leaving abusive relationships. The guide covered everything from divorce to child custody to restraining orders. It was a resource I wish I'd had when I was going through my own divorce. I wanted to make sure other women didn't have to navigate that difficult process alone. The financial literacy program was a huge success. We had women from all over the county attending our workshops. Many of them had never had control of their own finances before. They'd been kept in the dark, manipulated, and controlled. But now they were learning to stand on their own 2 feet. It was a beautiful thing to witness. I knew I was making a real difference in the world. I was helping women build better lives for themselves and their children. And I was honored to be part of their journey. I became passionate about financial literacy for women. I started a non-profit organization dedicated to teaching women how to manage their money, build credit, and invest for the future. We offered free workshops, one-on-one coaching, and online resources. It was incredibly rewarding to see women transform their lives. They went from feeling helpless and trapped to feeling empowered and in control. I also started a scholarship fund for single mothers who wanted to go back to school. I'd been there myself, struggling to make ends meet while trying to build a better life. I wanted to help other women do the same. The scholarship fund was a huge success. We'd helped dozens of women get their degrees, start new careers, and build better lives for themselves and their children. It was a beautiful thing to witness. I also started a podcast, interviewing other survivors of family abuse. I wanted to amplify their voices, to share their stories with the world. It was powerful, listening to their experiences, their struggles, their triumphs. I learned so much from them. They taught me about the incredible strength of the human spirit. They taught me that no matter how dark things get, there's always a way forward. They taught me that we're all capable of more than we ever imagined. I was grateful for the opportunity to share their stories. It was a humbling experience. I realized that I'd been given a gift. The gift of perspective. The gift of resilience. And I was going to use it to help others. I continued to grow as a person. I started teaching workshops on setting boundaries and protecting yourself from toxic people. I wanted to give people the tools they needed to protect themselves. It was incredibly rewarding to see people transform their lives. They went from feeling helpless and trapped to feeling empowered and in control. I was proud of the work I was doing. I was making a real difference in the world. I thought about Eleanor sometimes, about the woman she could have been. I wondered if she'd ever regretted her choices. I wondered if she'd ever understood how much she'd lost. I hoped she had. I hoped she'd found peace in her final days. I'd learned to let go of the anger. I'd learned to forgive. And I'd moved on. I'd built a life that was full of love and purpose. I'd found my voice. And I'd used it to help others. And that was the greatest gift of all. I thought about the journey I'd been on. The struggles, the triumphs, the growth. I was proud of who I'd become. I was proud of the life I'd built. I was grateful for every single moment. I sat on the porch one evening, watching the sunset. Mark came out and sat beside me, his arm around my shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything," I said. "How far we've come." He nodded. "We've been through a lot," he said. "But we made it." "We did," I said. "And we're stronger because of it." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun dip below the horizon. It was a perfect moment. A moment I'd never take for granted. I thought about the wedding dress sometimes. The beautiful dress that had almost destroyed my life. But I don't feel anger anymore. I feel gratitude. Gratitude for the lesson it taught me. Gratitude for the strength it gave me. Gratitude for the woman I became because of it. If you've ever been in a similar situation, I want you to know that you're not alone. There's always a way out. There's always a way to fight back. And there's always a way to find peace. I'm stronger now. I'm wiser. I'm ready for whatever comes next. I'm living my life on my own terms. I'm grateful for every single day. And I know that I'll always be okay. I thought about the future, about the possibilities. I was excited for what was to come. I had so many plans, so many dreams. I was going to continue to help others, to share my story, to be a voice for the voiceless. I was going to live my life to the fullest. And I was going to be happy. I looked at the stars, twinkling in the night sky. I felt a sense of peace, a sense of contentment. I'd built a beautiful life, a life filled with love and purpose. I'd found my voice, and I'd used it to help others. I'd become the woman I'd always wanted to be. And I knew that whatever happened next, I'd be okay. I'd always be okay. Because I was a survivor. And survivors never give up. I look back now at everything that happened. The abuse, the inheritance, the divorce. It's all part of my story now. And I'm grateful for it. Because it made me who I am. It taught me about strength. It taught me about resilience. And it taught me that sometimes, the people who hurt us the most are the ones who need our forgiveness the most. I found my voice. I fought for my truth. And I refused to be broken. I've always believed that love is worth fighting for. But I also know that sometimes, love means walking away. It means setting boundaries. It means protecting yourself. I've learned to trust my instincts, to listen to my gut, and to never let anyone make me feel small again. I sat on my porch one evening, watching the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful. I thought about everything I'd been through, everything I'd overcome. The abuse, the loneliness, the fear. It had all been so painful, so devastating. But it had also been a gift. It had forced me to become the woman I was meant to be. I'd learned to stand on my own 2 feet, to fight for what was right, to protect the people I loved. I'd learned that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. I was grateful for every single moment. I thought about Daniel sometimes, about what could have been. I felt sorry for him, in a way. He'd been so blind, so weak. He'd let his mother control him, manipulate him, destroy him. He'd lost everything because he couldn't say no to her. But that was his journey, not mine. I'd done my part. I'd loved him, supported him, believed in him. And he'd thrown it all away. I had no regrets. I'd done the right thing. I'd protected myself. And that was all that mattered. The ring sits in a drawer now, a reminder of everything I've been through. I don't wear it anymore. I don't need to. I've moved on. I've forgiven Eleanor. I've forgiven myself. I've learned to trust my instincts, to listen to my gut, and to never let anyone make me feel small again. I've built a life I'm proud of, a life filled with love and purpose. I've found my voice, and I've used it to help others. I've become the woman I was always meant to be. If you've ever been in a similar situation, I want you to know that you're not alone. There's always a way out. There's always a way to fight back. And there's always a way to find peace. I'm stronger now. I'm wiser. I'm ready for whatever comes next. I'm living my life on my own terms. I'm grateful for every single day. And I know that I'll always be okay. If you've ever had to stand up to someone who underestimated your worth, drop a comment below and tell us what happened. Subscribe to Calm Drama Stories for more tales of family secrets and stunning revenge. Thank you for watching.